for being gracious and stopping last week's meeting. As you know, we were in the middle of I think someone said a national security event. And so I want to thank everyone for being willing to hit pause and for us all to have a chance to catch up to the news, what was happening in our nation's capital. And also would like to say thank you to everyone. You've probably seen the email from Hannah last week, where we're rescheduling that session. And we also have heard from many of you where you have said that you would like to have a session on childcare in particular. So thank you to Sheena Safford and many, many others, Gina Ginn, Melissa, and anyone else that I may have missed. We're going to have a session on childcare, and Hannah will be organizing that, and we will have that towards the end of, well, I guess it'll be in early February. We also will be having a session on higher education, in particular higher education and the impacts of higher education on workforce. And so we will hear from some of our higher education experts. Of course, we have some of those folks on our committee, but they will also help us identify other candidates for presentation. I think that covers some of the additional material that we're going to add before we move into phase 2. And while I know you're all waiting on the edge of your seat for what phase 2 is going to bring, we're not ready to share it with you yet. The team is ideating, and we will have some proposals in front of you or some options in front of you and kind of talk about phase 2 in the weeks to come, certainly before we get to the end of these learning sessions. Lastly, before we get started, I want to thank Almar Walter, who is leaving us. This is his last day with the City of Columbus, and Almar will be going to Columbus State Community College. What are you going to be doing there, Almar?
I will be the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and the Chief Diversity Officer, working with our colleague, Rebecca Butler.
All right. Well, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve.
Well, just because you're going to Columbus State to work with Dr. Butler does not mean that your work here is done. There will be lots of intersection points and a lot of other opportunities for us to work with you and for you to work with many of the other colleagues on the committee, through their work. So congratulations. Great role, great institution. And I must say that Dr. Butler is, also pretty special as well. She's going to be, I think you'll have a great experience working with the team over there. So congratulations, and thank you for being here today on one of your last days with the City of Columbus and helping us get through today's presentation and so forth. I'm not sure who's going to be responsible for making sure these presentations go so smoothly after this, but make sure you train them well before you leave.
Yes, no. Will do.
So today we have a panel presentation to discuss high growth and venture. And we have two presenters, Tom Walker, President and CEO of Rev 1 Ventures, and Michael Redd, founder and CEO of 22 Ventures, venture partner at Advantage Sports Tech Fund as well. And so I think we will get started with the presentations. We're looking forward to both Tom and Michael's presentation. Tom, I believe, Almar, you have his slides ready to go. So we'll have Tom go first, and then we will hear from Michael. Tom, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here today. It's great to see so many friends. I wish we were in the room together. And Michael, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you. We've not had a chance to spend much time in person, but I look forward to your comments. So if the slides work, great. If not, I can just chat. So look at there we go. Well, perfect. A pleasure to be here today and share a little bit about the venture industry and how it's been impacted the last year or so. You can go on to the next slide, please. Just a little bit of a refresher on who Rev1 is. We were built to serve and attract high growth startups to Columbus. We are a nonprofit, which makes us a little unique in the venture industry. But we do what we do for the community, and we're funded by partners like the City of Columbus and Franklin County and a lot of the large corporations in town, logos of which you can see here on this slide. We couldn't do what we do without these partners. And so you can go to the next slide, please. Where we work is helping startups scale and corporates innovate. And so we're sort of the bridge between the two. The graph you see here is a typical business lifecycle graph. We work in the beginning of a company's life, and that valley you see in front of you is what we call the valley of death, and a very ominous term, but that's a point at which entrepreneurs and startup companies are spending more capital than they have coming in. And so our goal is to provide resources and support to help companies in Columbus that fit our target market to make it through the valley and be stronger and continue to grow here in our community. Next slide, please. We've been in existence now for roughly 7 years. We've had a big impact. There's been almost $2.5 billion economic impact to our community, and we measure that by the revenues that the companies we've helped start generate and the capital that they attract. And one of our focuses is also to change the equation in our industry on diversity and inclusion. And we're proud that our portfolio of companies that we support have 42% of them have diverse leadership teams. As a venture industry, that number is roughly in the 3 to 4% range. So we are trying to change that equation and make Columbus stand out in the country. Next slide, please. And we call ourselves a startup studio, which means we bring together certain resources to help these companies launch and be successful in our community. And they're in these 4 pillars. It's all the aspects of helping grow the team, the connections that we can help provide. We have an incredibly large service provider network in town of 36 law firms, accounting firms, marketing firms, engineering firms that assist these companies along with us. We now have over 100 million of venture capital under management. So we are a direct investor in a lot of the companies. And if you've had a chance to visit the Kinnear facility, we have almost 70,000 feet there. We house 54 companies. And pre-COVID, we churned that building about 40% a year. So there's a lot of movement of companies coming in and companies moving out into the community. Next slide, please. So into the topic for today, the state of venture capital and how has it been impacted during COVID. The region we are in, the Great Lakes, we've seen a 400% increase in venture funding since 2006. However, we're only 4% of the total U.S. venture funding. So there's a lot of growth, and many in our industry believe that the Great Lakes and the Midwest is going to be the next high growth area for venture capital. In the Great Lakes, we're home to over 1/3 of the U.S. Fortune 500 companies, which they end up becoming customers of startups. And that's a lot of how Rev1's model is built, helping start companies that have B2B products, and they can find the customers in their back door. We've seen a significant increase in corporate venture capital in the Great Lake region, and over 30% of the U.S. university-based R&D is in the Great Lakes. So there's a lot of opportunity, but there's still a long way to go. Next slide, please. So during COVID, in the beginning, we thought that the venture market was really going to be impacted negatively. We've crammed two charts on this one slide for you. On the left is the U.S. Venture activity, and on the right is Ohio venture activity. It hasn't been as negatively affected as we anticipated. In fact, 2020 was a record year in the growth of new funds. Over 69 billion was raised for new venture funds, which was a record in the U.S. Through Q3, U.S. VC investment was up 18% over 2019, but deal count was down. And so what that means is there's been more money go to larger companies. So we have seen a decrease in startup capital and seed capital. Sadly, funding for women and minority entrepreneurs fell to 2017 levels. So while the industry has recognized how poor they are in that category, they've reverted back to 2017. So we're hopeful that that will change in 21. We are seeing, of the new funds that were created, you are seeing more and more venture funds being created by women or Black founders. So that will start changing the equation. Seed stage investments were impacted the most. Deals were down 18% year over year in the U.S. Now, Ohio has been impacted more negatively. We've had a 32% decrease in seed funding year over year, and the overall investment activity in the state was down 23%. So it is impacting us in a more negatively. You can go to the next slide, please. By industry, what we've seen, tech-based companies focused on automotive, entertainment, or food tech have been impacted the most. Positively impacted have been digital health companies, online retail, and work-from-home tools. As an example, if anybody saw the press release a week or so ago on the company UpDocs, which is headquartered in Bridge Park in Dublin, it's a digital health company, one of the most used digital doc platforms where you can see your doctor through the web. It's one of the most used in the country. It was purchased a couple of weeks ago, which has been a good exit for the community, and it was an investment in Rev 1. So, those industries are doing great. We're still seeing more momentum and deal flow in those industries as well. Where the other area where we're having a hard time, there's been less venture capital coming into the state, which is making it more difficult for entrepreneurs to raise money locally. So Rev 1 is an example. We are a syndicate partner. We co-invest with other investors, and we are seeing a bit of a decline in companies wanting to make new investments right now just in this environment. Coming in, just pre-COVID, there had been a dramatic increase of venture capital coming into the state. And I expect that to return, because the other thing that is happening is more of us are, working from other locales, and you're seeing investors move out of the valley or move out of other areas, and they're more open to look at opportunities all over the country. And I think we're poised to help on that. You can go to the next slide, please. So what have we done during COVID? Just like all of you, I'm sure in this meeting, we had to pivot pretty quickly. By April of last year, we transferred all of our support services virtual and online, and it worked pretty well. And entrepreneurs have really responded in a positive way. We created a COVID relief playbook for all of our portfolio companies. We actually launched an innovation internship program last year. We placed 72 interns in 21 startups, and 54 of those students were diverse. When we had plans of launching that internship pre-COVID, and so when COVID hit, I thought, how in the world are we going to do this? But it actually worked great, and we're in the middle of placing new students in startups as we speak. We supported over 30 companies in accessing pandemic funding, whether it was PPP or through Jobs Ohio, to help keep those companies going. And we partnered with the City of Columbus and Franklin County on their recovery fund, which has just been phenomenal, supporting over 1,000 businesses in our community get through the pandemic. And we've been doing a lot related to ensuring a safe workplace at our facilities, so that scientists can get back in and use the labs in our Kinnear facility. We've built 2 new venture funds as well. We're launching them this year. Rev 1 Fund 2, we're launching in a couple of weeks, and that'll be a seed and Series A fund. And we're working on a new fund we're calling Future Value that we hope to launch in March, which is a pre-seed fund, so very early funding. You can go to the next slide, please. So that actually concludes my presentation. This is a slide shows our corporate partners in a little bit better fashion, and so proud of them. We couldn't do what we do without their support, and I'm happy to yield to Michael or take questions.
Tom, we'd like to have Michael give his presentation, and then we will move to the Q&A section.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Yeah, Chrissy, thank you so much. Tom, great to meet you as well. Committee, thank you for your time and allowing me to be a part of this discussion. I am certainly passionate about our city. I'm passionate not only about recovery, but prosperity. Recovery is returning back to a baseline. But I dare to dream that we can begin to be prosperous post-COVID. And so I am really excited about this conversation, this discussion, the next steps, and to seeing venture be effective and impactful in the prosperity of our community. For the last 7 or 8 years after retiring from basketball, it was really a passion for me to get into the high structure finance world and see not only what I can do in that space, but also have diversity within that space. You don't often see too many Black folks in the venture world. I think there's actually less than 1% African-American investors in the venture space. And so it was my cause and passion to kind of disrupt that to a degree. So having the opportunity to work at NCT for a bit, which was a great experience, and then moving to Silicon Beach in California and getting involved with funds in California, then also becoming an angel investor into companies in California, which led me to becoming a mentor in Snapchat's accelerator, which then led me to Israel and being involved in that whole ecosystem, which we know Israel is second to none when it comes to innovation and creativity. But the whole goal for me all the while was to cross-pollinate what was happening around the world with Columbus, Ohio. I absolutely have a passion for Columbus, and I believe in localization. Globalization is doing global things from a local place. And so the last 8 years has been a passion of mine to aggregate talented people who just don't have access and opportunity, and giving them opportunities to have access to mentorship, funding, and particularly Black founders. Less than 1% of all Black founded companies are funded. Less than 10% altogether, if you aggregate women and Black men and women founders, our companies are being funded. So that was pre-COVID. And so I think there was an issue pre-COVID, and we deal with the same issues post-COVID. And that's not enough diversity at the board level, CEO level, general partner level, and also managing partner level. I believe if you can have diversity at that level, there's going to be more of a cognizant thought or towards investing into diverse companies. And so that's been a passion of mine. I founded an innovation center a few years ago where we were aggregating coders, designers, biz devs, artists, talented people from all around the city, and giving them opportunity and access to mentorship. And that was a great success, and we still have that facility. We're working on another facility right now in the process of working on another facility. So it's been an incredible journey over the last 7, 8 years, but the passion has always been giving people platforms and access that they normally would not have had. So the stats bear out that if you can invest into a diverse team, you'll have greater returns, you'll have greater profits, you'll have greater revenue across the board. And so it's been my mission to not only invest into a certain person, but to everybody who has great ideas. And I think Columbus is littered with talented people. And so we got to give them opportunity and access. And so it's been a great passion of mine to aggregate those talented people, create a pipeline of talent, and begin to create opportunity for funding for them. So I've done that personally over the years. I haven't been too out there with that, but I've done it in secret. And I've had a great joy of seeing people develop and grow and get the access they need to be successful.
Thank you, Michael. Now we move to the part of the program where we have the committee ask questions, but I do want to ask you one question before we get started. With COVID-19, did you, what have been the greatest challenges, for the investing you've been doing, and the, type of opportunities you've been looking for, or businesses coming to you and asking for investment? Like what have you seen? What have been the greatest challenges you have experienced?
Personally, there's a couple ways to answer that question. So, Christy, answer that question in one way is I created 22 Ventures. 22 Ventures is an acquisition entrepreneurship play where I personally have been in the business of buying or acquiring companies that have been around for a long time. So let me back up for a second. There's about $10 trillion of business assets that are transferring from boomers, baby boomers. And so these are companies that are very profitable, have solid EBITDAs, but they're just dated in their their systems, their marketing, their branding. And so I've been trying to bring those companies into the 21st century with technology. But also with that, there's been a number of entrepreneurs who've been just kicking the tires over the years, selling their ideas and their concepts. And I'm saying, hey, listen, we'll bring you into an infrastructure that's already established, that's profitable, bring the ingenuity, bring that innovation, and bring that talent into this company and be a CEO and grow the company. So it's somewhat disruptive to traditional entrepreneurship, but looking for talented people that have been trying to do it for a number of years and giving them something that already has momentum. So that's one way I've been trying to help entrepreneurs in this climate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now turn the speaker over to our panelists, to our committee members, and we will have a Q&A session. So who has the first question today?
I have a question. I think we've seen in other cities where they have strong startup communities and successful startup communities, part of what has helped those ecosystems grow is when there is an exit, then you see an influx of other people going off and starting businesses, becoming founders, and then there's that additional capital that can then be invested. I'd be curious to know, obviously we had Cover My Meds was a large one, UpDocs is the most recent one. What is being done in Columbus that as we have these exits, we're creating that infrastructure to help birth additional companies and get those dollars flowing into additional startups so that the startup community as a whole continues to grow?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that. That's a great question and great observation. I've lived in several communities and have had the benefit of seeing the impact that exits have. They create millionaires and usually those folks are from your community, so they stay in the community and they invest in a lot of ways. You see new restaurants come out of tech company, exited tech company entrepreneurs. You see all kinds of things happen. And we're seeing that here. So in our portfolio, we have a number of serial entrepreneurs that came from past exits in town. One of our companies, ScriptDrop, was founded by several entrepreneurs that came out of Cover My Meds. I think you'll see the same thing happen with up docks. We stay close with them. We invest back in them. You're going to see it happen with Root, the IPO that happened. They're all in a mandatory lockup period, but eventually, that money's going to start flowing, and I think you'll see individuals out of that company give back to the community in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it would also be, can I say one other thing related to that? I think it would be also interesting to think about how do we start pulling those people into these kinds of meetings. They're not necessarily seen as kind of your typical established leaders, but I think those are people who are going to be starting businesses and have money to support the nonprofits and will have a say in where the community goes from here. I think as we think about what we mean in terms of community leaders, expanding to include some of those people would also be really valuable.
And I've also seen our athletes come back in town as well. Former Buckeyes who've done well in professional sports come back and want to get involved with a lot of the local companies and startups in Columbus as well. So that's really encouraging. And I think the competition level needs to rise in Columbus when it comes to accelerators and incubators and even venture. I think it's very dangerous to have one monopolize the whole scene. Whether it be venture or accelerator, there needs to be a competition amongst us that produces incredible opportunities in our city.
I'd like to add a little bit onto what Heather was asking. I've been fortunate enough to work with lots of mom and pop shops and help them start. In the coffee business, we help folks set up from, the whole layout and design and all of that stuff all the way to the back of the house. But what happens, it's above my pay grade. We have 7 little shops, but to really scale, if there's someone who wants to, how would they get in touch with you all? Are there any ways we could create a forum or some place? I know we have some startup weeks and stuff like that, but a lot of times those are tech related. And I think with some of the restaurateur entrepreneurs I work with, it would be cool if they have a really great concept, if they could come to folks like you. How would that happen?
It's a great point. I think it starts with bringing it up first and foremost, and thank you for bringing it up. I think that's important. I think we need to follow through with that. You would be at Columbus State, sorry. But Christy obviously can help facilitate that, because that's an important thing to do, is to gather some of our leaders in the city and say, hey, there's incredible opportunities beyond just tech to get involved with where we can scale and grow these companies.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Next question. It's awfully quiet out there.
Well, I have a question. Being a community person, how can we get to starting the thought of owning a business with young people? I mean, we start telling them that they should go to college, or maybe they should pick up a trade. But I don't think I've ever heard, or, I'm not familiar with business people ever giving that as an option to young people today. How can we do that?
Yeah, one of the things that we do is we promote entrepreneurship back at the university level. So our internship programs are designed to expose young people to that entrepreneurship is a path, and put them right next to an entrepreneur that's leading a startup, so they can see what it's like. And some love it and some don't, but that's the way to really start letting folks know that starting a company is a way to fulfill your career goals. You don't always need to, go into a large company. And we're seeing a lot of success with this, because what happens is once they graduate, they're usually offered a job by those companies, those startups that hired them. And when that happens, all of a sudden they're given options in the company, so they own a little equity. So that gives them that early fire to see it through. And so that's one of our goals, is how do you how do you just continue that kind of fervor in our community?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I think wealth creation generates from ownership. And my son is ambitious about playing in the NBA, and I've been teaching him. I said, no, son, you don't want to be a player in the NBA. You want to own a team. And so ownership is critical. And so, yeah, I agree with Tom. I'm teaching my kids now how to play Monopoly. And they're 13 and 10 years old. So I'm teaching them Monopoly to teach them about money. And I couldn't spell entrepreneurship in high school. I didn't know what it was to be an entrepreneur in high school. So that level of exposure is critical. And then once people get the exposure, they can take off.
Karen Mosenter, I see that you have a question in the chat. Would you like to ask your question? I believe it's for Tom Walker.
Yeah, sure. Tom, you had mentioned that 42% of the companies that Rev1 is invested in have diverse leadership teams. And I was just wondered if you could describe kind of what that means, what type of diversity, and how you prioritize diversity in your portfolio.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for us, diversity is women-led or minority-led, and so those are companies that either have women on the founding team or minorities. And if you think back to Michael's opening statement, all the studies show you that diverse leadership teams outperform those that aren't, and so that's just part of our belief system. What we do is we try and remove any biases as entrepreneurs come through the door, and so we remove bias from our processes because we want our learning labs and those kinds of things to be as inclusive as possible. And we're continuing to learn and get better at this, but we do think that that's one reason we've had such high diversity numbers, both from the top of the funnel, so the entrepreneurs that come see us in the community, all the way to the bottom of the funnel to those that we invest in.
Thank you, Tom. The next question comes from Sandy Duell Ahern, and then Ariana, you are up after Sandy. Sandy?
Christy, thank you. Michael, I guess my question is somewhat specifically for you, but maybe for Tom as well. Michael, you touched on the prosperity word, and I'm very glad you mentioned that. I am as concerned about it as you are. And I think in the theme of this group, obviously we're gathering to listen to what's happening in various industries with the idea that we will eventually be thinking through some recommendations on how Columbus and its region can recover. And I'm curious what you're concerned about for the future. As you look at venture opportunities, and Tom as well, when you think about venture opportunities and you think about prosperity, could you share with us what your concerns are about that in the future, so we can think through that as well?
Yeah, I have optimism bias. So I try not to think of the negatives per se, and I'm an actionist. So beyond conversation, let's just do it type of thing. But I think it's a long-term plan that we have to put in place where we're really, really focused on really having diversity at the general partner, managing director level when it comes to venture. We need cultural interpreters. And what I mean by that is when you have diverse companies, sometimes diverse investors or not diverse investors cannot empathize or understand what they're going through or what they see as far as the idea. So we need more cultural interpreters in position of power and leadership as an investors to really, really understand these diverse companies that are coming towards us. So I think being more cognizant of that and making a considered effort to have more Blacks in venture, more women in venture, which will then we can have the dispersion of wealth and funds to those companies.
Tom, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Thank you, Michael.
Yes, that was excellent response. Yeah, just in addition, going into the pandemic, our country actually, you know, we have two economies going on right now. We have the great economy, the wealthier getting wealthier, and then we have the economy where the underserved communities and are just really struggling. And so, you know, I'm very concerned about that portion of the economy coming out of the pandemic. It's not going to be good. And you know, I believe that any community that wants to have a great startup community or a great thriving big corporate community, all aspects of the economy have to be thriving. And so I think Columbus is going to have to double down on our efforts to help underserved communities and help those businesses get through this pandemic, not only survive, but be stronger on the other side. Because to have a great small business community, everybody has to be supported and thriving. And I don't know that we have the answer to some of those problems yet, but I think that many of us are more cognizant of the challenges. If you just look at the work that the city of Columbus and Franklin County did in the recovery fund efforts, you know, how do we expand those kinds of efforts? How do we expand it to providing assistance to actually starting new companies coming out of the pandemic? You know, I think I'm an optimist as well, that these are challenges none of us have faced before, and many in our community were struggling going into this, and they're going to, you know, they're not thriving during this pandemic. So I think we need to keep our eyes open, and we need to be creative.
Thank you. Ariana, you are on deck, and we have a question from Tashia Safford, who's driving after that, and then Stephanie Hightower, I believe, is in the third spot. I'm a great air traffic controller. I missed my calling.
Thanks, Christy. So I guess mine is a little bit more of a comment than a question. I would, you know, as a woman, I'm obviously extremely happy to see a lot of programs that are focused on women entrepreneurs. And my request and my challenge to Michael, to Tom, is, you know, I feel like sometimes diversity tends to have a more streamlined view. And so I would love to see programs also around Latinos, which, you know, are 5% of the population here in Columbus and Franklin County, and then also the immigrant population, because I think that that's a community that we may not be. I mean, yes, they're starting out small and they're building, but what would be possible for them if we were able to provide them a little bit more support? Because, right, studies show that immigrants are also one of the fastest growing segments of the population that start businesses, and very successful ones. So that's all. It's really more of a comment, because just throughout my career, I feel like Latinos tend to get sidelined when we're looking at state programming or statewide programming, because we're not as large of a segment of the population as like African Americans are. That's all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add to that? Christine?
Sure.
Terrific point. My best friend in life is a Latino. And just a year and a half ago, we made him executive director of our nonprofit. And he leads it, and I've known him for 13 years. And so you're exactly right when it comes to that. As far as diversity beyond just Black folks and women, it has to include everybody. And I totally agree with that. So that's just funny you mentioned that. A year and a half ago, we brought him on as executive director of our nonprofit. So I totally agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts too.
Yes, ma'am.
So Tashia Safford is driving, and I'm going to ask her question for her. And there are some similar questions in the chat. But Tom, going back to the graph that outlined women and minorities and the shift that we, investment was down in going back to 2017 numbers, which those numbers were not that great. Is there a strategy in place or a plan in place to address this?
Yeah, and that data I shared was national data.
Okay.
It came from PitchBook. It wasn't local data. And PitchBook is a database of the venture capital industry. Yeah, I mean, it's what's interesting is that, I'm reading more and more about the creation of or funds created by women or Blacks or other minorities segments. But that's not coming through in the deal flow numbers yet, and so the one comment I have about the data from 2020, it wasn't down in terms of overall dollars that much, but it was down in the number of deals. So I think more money went to existing companies, existing portfolios to help them get through the pandemic. It's just a guess on my part. And fewer new deals were done. We'll have Q4 data soon, and we'll get to, really see, where some of those details are.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Hightower, I think you have a question.
Am I unmuted now?
You are.
Yeah, I don't know how to use this platform. I don't know how to get my face on there. I got the wrong number. I'm just anyway. So, for those of you who know me, you know that at the Columbus Urban League, that our work is about the promise for equity for all people in Columbus. And so I appreciate this conversation, but I really think we need to drill down a little bit more, because I agree with you, Michael, what you said, that there shouldn't be one company that is monopolizing this segment here as in the community. And Christina, I will say this, that when I talk about the disparities that have been illuminated by COVID, we talk about Black and brown people. We just don't talk about Black folks, because we know that this is something that people of color, especially in this area, have not been given an opportunity to participate in. And so while COVID has illuminated the racist structures that exist, we also know that there are rules that plague our community that keep us out of being able to, Michael, participate in the kind of work that we're talking about here today. And so we know that, for those of you know, Venture Suites, Black Hack, they are now in our building here at one of our buildings here at the Urban League. And just watching their struggle is exactly what you're talking about. If we're talking about wealth creation and wealth building, or even exposing other or Black and brown people to the opportunities that exist in this space, is very difficult. And first, what we have to do is we have to educate our community of that this exists. We don't have wealth, so we don't know about venture capitals. We don't know about how to go build a business. And so part of what we're doing with the Minority Businesses Center and the Equity Fund is to try and to help to educate people. But I'll say this, going back to Michael, what you talked about, or maybe it was Tom, you talked about, yes, the Equity Fund was put into place. We only had about $1.6 million, all right, that we were able to give to those existing businesses or some new businesses. The demand was over $300,000 of what we needed to even begin to scratch the surface for those Black and brown businesses. And we did do some women-owned businesses to even get them to where they needed to be, or startups. So my point is, we still have to have some very candid conversations, and I don't mean to get on my soap, but I am, because I've been watching what's happening at the Capitol all day on CNN. We need to continue to have real conversations around those rules that plague our communities, Black and brown communities, that don't give us the ability to work in this space. And when we talk about diversity, Yes, we are talking about women. I get that. And a lot of women are in this in play, but Black people are not. And so my question is, as we're building out this resiliency initiative, how do we make sure that entities like Venture Suite and Black Hack are able to find those funds that they need so that we can begin to educate the Black and Brown community that this kind of stuff exists and we can help them. We know we got a lot of entrepreneurs, young kids who want to be in this space. How do we educate them and get them in that space so that we can grow that wealth building opportunity that you talked about, Michael?
That's a great question. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that the examples that you gave, you're going to see them be successful. That's a group that we're working with, and I think they're becoming successful in circling the kind of funds they need to start up and grow. But you're absolutely right. It's in our industry, it's hard to raise money for any deal, and when it comes to minorities broadly, or then drilling down, as you described it, Stephanie, it's even more difficult. And so I do think you can make a change and an impact at a community level. And I hope that we see the Jones brothers be some of the early success stories.
Yeah, I think the narrative, and I agree with Tom on that. I think the narrative on Black founded companies is that if we invest into them, it's of charity.
That's right.
There's no economics behind investing in those companies. And we've got to change that narrative and that stigma. Black folks don't have incentive necessarily to be an entrepreneur because our credit is not great. The regulations of our credit, we need to change that. And also it's hard to get a loan from a bank. So when your credit's not great and you can't get a loan from a bank, and you're not getting funding from a VC, what incentive do I have to be an entrepreneur?
That's right.
Because Black people in general, there's a huge disparity of wealth within our country. So you don't have a lot of Black accredited investors. So there's a lot of nuances to this. And so we've got to be able to do a better job from a system to begin to incentivize minority-led companies, particularly Black companies.
Well, and Michael, you and Kenny, we're going to you next. But I want to make a statement there. Even the literacy around, investing. I mean, all the. I just think about we talk about financial literacy all the time, but the literacy around, this topic, right? Just understanding what does it mean to be an accredited investor. What does my credit score need to be? What kind of banking relationship do I need to have? How do I identify, VC investors and so forth? What's that world look like? I mean, that is a very, for the most part, has for many, many years, right? Forever, especially to Black people and to women as well, has been a world that has been closed off to us because for the most part, it was white men who were, in that world. And it was a very, if you weren't at the country club or you weren't playing golf or you weren't in some of those rooms, right, you wouldn't even have the opportunity. And even, when the opportunities present themselves, business inside of a business, I worked in a corporation, I worked in a law firm. So I heard deal flow and deal opportunities all of the time because that was common nomenclature and discussion to talk about, how, a deal and an opportunity and what you might need to play, right? You might need 50,000, you might need 25,000, you might need 100,000, whatever it is. But the conversation would take place, among the lawyers and among people in the company and so forth. But you still have to get invited, right? You still have to be in the room to have those conversations. And so, this is more of a statement again than a question, but I think it's something for us all to be thinking about. If we're going to build more entrepreneurs and build more investors, from the Black, brown, and female community, we have to build our muscle and our literacy and understand how it all works.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I agree with Michael's comments. And the added adding on to that is, we need to think differently about the kinds of support, because if I kind of continue on Michael's thread, a Black or brown founder doesn't have the family network or friends that can help fund them and their salary needs so they can, pay the mortgage and feed the family like a white founder does in that social network that you've just described. And so it's hard to quit your job to start a new company if you because you have to keep that money coming in. So, we're one of our new investment programs for this year. We're actually raising some grant dollars so that we can bridge that equity gap, so we can provide a salary for a period of time, to help them focus on the new business at hand. But, and I'm not suggesting we have this figured out by any stretch, but I do think that the challenges are so different, and the solutions have to meet those challenges.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And Tom, to your point, it's great that you are setting up a fund, but even those, I say those of us, and I say us because when you're married to an entrepreneur, it is a partnership. It's not just, not just him, but how you make those decisions, right? The decisions that we had to make, so that Otto could become, leave a law firm, leave a partnership, and go become an entrepreneur. And I know many other people have these stories, but like how we tell that story, so that if there are people who want to do that, there are sacrifices that you make on the front end, and hopefully pay off, on the back end and later down the road. But how to prepare yourself to do that? Like, we have to tell those stories too, because there are people out here who can do it. Somebody can leave a job, someone can keep a job, and someone can start their entrepreneur, live out their dream. But we should share, and I say we, right? We should share how we do that in a way that allows people to say, oh yeah, well we could do that, right? We could make that work, because there are people who are professional. People who could do it, but knowing how to do it is part of it as well.
Can I add to that, Christy? I think proximity was important for me. Going out to the Valley and going out to Silicon Beach and learning, leveraging my platform that I had in the MBA to meet whoever I wanted to meet, get that intellectual capital, bring it back home, and be a bridge for other young Black founders and leaders and minorities and women, and give them that intel and that knowledge, even flying them to California to meet these mentors and investors is so critical, because you got to have the knowledge and you have to have the information to really be successful. More than just giving you capital out of just entitlement or out of just charity. Let me give you knowledge. And once you have the knowledge, you can build from there. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yep, that's right. Kenny McDonald, you're up.
Well, first, thanks to Tom and to Michael. They're a big part of the community here. And I just wanted to pause a little bit. I've been here 10 years, and this ecosystem that we're talking about, I don't know if we're celebrating enough what's happening. The fact that we actually had the exits that we had this last year in the middle of a pandemic wouldn't even have been in our wildest dreams 10 years ago. They have companies that are started here out of our own soil with investors that came from our market and are exiting now. And that's happening now repeatedly. And we need to celebrate that across the board, and then build on that and make sure that we're adding the elements. I think there's a lot of research that says it's just smart money to invest in minority businesses because of who they hire as well, right? So you're more likely to hire people who look like you, and there's just an enormous amount of opportunity for us to not only create wealth, but to also just build up entire communities through this. So again, I'll praise Tom. I think we have one of the best venture capital partners in the country from an economic development standpoint, and we're blessed to have folks like Michael who are coming back home to invest. I think we need to make that a little bit more systematic. And then we're obviously blessed to have Drive Capital here. I think last count we have 3,000 plus jobs created by them. That is like, another major employer coming to town with the dozens of companies that they're investing in. We didn't even have that on our radar screen 10 years ago. And then the final thing I'll say is I just was on a call with our the Biden administration's advisory, and the new Commerce Secretary, former governor of Rhode Island, comes out of the venture world. I can imagine them like it was during the Obama-Biden administration, the first go round, that there's going to be some real emphasis on pretty much everything we've talked about today. But some real savvy people actually leading Commerce Department, things like that we're going to have to figure out quickly how to leverage and connect with and kind of get, show what we're doing already, and then ask to do more of the things we've been talking about on this call.
Thank you, Kenny. A quick question for you. As you think about bringing, economic development, and obviously you're always thinking about large companies coming, companies coming here and employees and so forth. When you think about economic development and, what makes Columbus attractive, do you also think about that for the VC, entrepreneur, attraction as well?
Yeah, Tom and I work together a lot, and we directly invest in it because it just a very simple way we think about it. You can create jobs by creating companies, of which we have a lot of work to do to just generate more new enterprises here. Two is we can retain them and help grow the companies that we have in the market, whether they're small or large. And then finally, we can bring new employers to the market that are coming in with to set up their second office or their 10th office or stuff like that. There's really those three basic ways you can create a job. You got to invest in all. And we've had a comprehensive plan from the beginning in this community. And we can't forget that not one of those things is a silver bullet. You got to do all three in a pretty substantial way. And this is the arena where there's been not nearly as much investment as there is in some of the other stuff, right? And it's starting to happen. So again, I think that's another reason to celebrate it when it works.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Tasha Booker Fowler, I believe you have a question. Tasha?
Yeah, thank you, Christy, and thank you to Michael and everyone for answering these questions. So more of a comment, you may have answered this kind of in a roundabout way, but I have two parts. The first question really is around the future of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, right? We're starting to see a lot of minorities use the crowdsourcing platforms to start their businesses because they don't have access, right? Or they don't necessarily have the mentorship and the support around creating, comprehensive business plans to take them to the banks and to other funders. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the future of crowdfunding will mean for entrepreneurship? And then on another question, sorry, Christy, taking a little bit of liberty to get this in. So just this morning, the news was talking about, I think it was CBS this morning, was talking about prior to the pandemic, Detroit had the largest concentration of Black female entrepreneurs. What's working there, if you know, right? What's working there that can be replicated across communities?
I don't know what's working there. It's working. Whoever who has the money, who has the power, they're aware that there's incredible ideas coming out of women, and particularly Black women. And it's not a charity, obviously. It's an economic play for them. So there's a lot to that question. But I will say we just need to do more of that. There's no question, because we have plenty of talent, especially here in Central Ohio. Plenty of talent. Over the years, I've met so many different people. And so again, we just need to make the jump, not just be patronized or placated, but actually invest into Black founders.
Yeah, I can attempt the crowdsourcing question. It's not an area I've spent a ton of time in, but the feds have reduced some of the hurdles that make crowdsourcing, successful for certain kinds of businesses, and I think you're going to continue to see those kinds of platforms grow. I think as a younger generation is coming up, I think we're going to see them grow in a way that we probably can't imagine on this call today, because they're just more creative in using social media and things of that nature. So I think it's going to be look for different kinds of platforms. There's angel crowdfunding sources. There's all sorts of different kinds now, and it's good source of funds for certain kinds of companies.
Tasha, this is Trudy. And speaking about Detroit, I lived there, and that's an African-American city. And there is Black wealth in Detroit. And there are African-Americans who have been through, for 20 to 30 years, been not only in public sector leadership, but also corporate leadership. And so, and you can see that with the leaders that you see in the automotive companies, which from there has spun out other types of businesses. So I think the difference is, much like in Atlanta, much like other cities that have a large and diverse group of African Americans who have built wealth and are investing back in their communities. I think that is a huge difference. I think Columbus is moving in that direction. And we're moving in that direction, particularly from a corporate standpoint, as far as the discussion we've been having today. But it's also going to be incumbent about people of color to invest in their own people, whether they're Asian Indian, whether they're Hispanic. It's not about asking for that handout. It's also about investing in your own as well.
Yeah, good point, Trudy, especially on the historical aspects of Detroit in particular, with the, automotive companies and others that, spun off and created opportunities for, whether it was dealerships, ancillary businesses that came from the automotive industry, and opportunities for minorities and women to own those businesses or to start their entrepreneur, track, out of those businesses. So great point, pointing that out. Our next question is from, I believe it is Michael Smithson. Michael?
Sorry, I was on mute. It wasn't so much as a question. It was really adding some information in there about, as we look at some of the different subsets of minority representation and doing all the things, especially in the venture space. I was just wanting to making the group aware a little bit too about some other subsets that are very focused on the LGBTQ community, which is the LEAP program and the Pride Fund that are both based here in Columbus, of which I'm involved with. But, there are those subsets that also do help focus on other minorities, such as Black and brown folk and other people in the community as well, that are out there as we're growing and building those as well. And I wanted more and more people to be aware of them, so they continue to know about the opportunities that are out there. And I agree with both with Michael and Tom. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity to continue to really engage and educate and uplift and help fund all kinds of folks that are minority representation here within our city, for sure.
Thank you, Michael. Mark Swanson, did you have another question?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm not sure if I'm drilling down too far in because the folks I interact with when we talk about entrepreneurship are someone in a community that has an underserved community that has a brick and mortar or a food truck, and then they would like to expand. They haven't worked for a big company before and receive the education or the financial literacy required to maybe even approach folks like you guys. But even before they could do that, there's got to be some sort of training for site selection, lease negotiation, what it's like to bring on partners. What does it look like financially to them as they try and expand? Will someone give them runway money so that they can actually get doing something you guys were talking about before, that gap money between I had a job and now I have this great idea and I'm going to do something cool and it's going to be wildly successful. I think about those folks because when I look at like working with the food trucks over the years on the Restaurant Association, I watched how scrappy and amazing those folks are and how they move from that to brick and mortar. But several tell me to this day, like, man, if I had someone who could help me with, here's how, they can't spend $300 an hour on a lawyer. So what's a lease look like? And what's site selection look like? And what does percentage rent and break evens and natural breaks and all of those things that you have to learn? I didn't know when we were expanding, I had to learn. And understanding how to have a very responsible and conservative pro forma to go forward to look for investment. So I guess maybe I'm just talking, in groups too small to reach out to. But I think if we're going to revitalize communities and work on resiliency within those communities, the best place to start is folks from those communities. And if they're opening successful businesses and we can help them grow, that helps them help other folks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's also, you point me in a direction to, make a clarification. With our topic today on venture capital, small businesses and venture-backed companies are two very different animals, and they require very different kinds of help. And so I'll get out over my skis if I start talking about all the kinds of help small businesses need. But in one of my previous statements, I think that to have a good venture-backed entrepreneurial high growth part of our economy, we have to have a really strong small business sector. And, so making sure that there are groups in town focused on the kinds of networks and support that you're outlining that are needed. That's all part of our economy. And
and I'm sorry, Tom, I did understand that. I was just saying for our group, since what we're talking about is this recovery resiliency, I want to make sure that I was saying it out loud and also taking my notes so that for future meetings, and if you guys have any insight, it would be super valuable. And it's good to know that you believe in a strong small business community to help plant seeds for things that might require some venture capital. So thanks.
Without a doubt.
Thank you, Mark. Angela Brett, I believe you have a question. Angela, your mic should be open.
Yes, thank you, Christy. So I guess beyond investment dollars and supplier diversity, what are your thoughts on additional roles that corporate partners should or could be playing? I heard there talk about mentorship. Should corporate partners play a bigger role in mentorship, providing that mentorship just with basic business knowledge? I think Michael also mentioned cultural competency. The corporate partners have a role to play in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have to add too much to that, but I agree with that has to happen. Not just to incubate for their corporation, but to genuinely give incredible knowledge and intel to budding founders. I think it's super important for corporations to consider that and to do that. They are doing it. We can do more though.
Yeah, I agree. They can be customers. It's a really important role that our corporate partners can play for businesses. Be the first customer, try things out. And there's so many examples of that happening in town. And, I'm in front of corporates all the time, and I continue to talk about how they can open their doors with advisory services, mentorship, and let's not set investment aside, because to have a robust economy, we need more venture funds. We need several venture funds in town. We need scores of them, and the best investors are the corporate base, and we still live in a pretty risk averse region of the country. So it's incumbent on all of us. A, we need to be successful with the dollars that they are providing us, and B, we need to keep them focused on doing it again for multiple people.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Angela. Well, the time is, we're getting near the end of our session today. I want to thank Tom Walker and Mike Red for being here with us today, and thank you for the conversation. I think we all heard a lot, and there are lots of comments in the chat which will allow us to have a robust conversation about the recommendations that we make back to the mayor's council president, Shannon Harden, and the county commissioners, after we wrap up our phase 2 of this work. I always like to say that when you present to us for the phase 1, we always reserve the right to perhaps ask you a few questions in phase 2. So you may get an email or a request to even show up again for a smaller group if we need to have a few questions answered. And of course, Tom, we have your presentation as well. And we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today to help us think about recovery and resiliency and equity and an equitable recovery and resiliency in Columbus as we move forward. So thank you so much for giving us your time and attention today.
Always available.
All righty.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, Michael.
Thank you.
Now to the committee. Next week, we are scheduled on Wednesday, January 20th, and we are scheduled to have travel, tourism, and cultural institutions present. It is not lost on me that January 20th is Inauguration Day. It's not lost on any of us that January 20th is Inauguration Day. Our plan is to move forward. And Hannah and Mike Stevens, correct me if I'm wrong, but our plan is to hold those dates and hold our meeting unless there is something that is going to be distracting like last week that keeps us from doing that. Unless I hear otherwise from the committee, we will continue. I know that we have travel, tourism, culture, and the cultural institutions group have been waiting to present. They have their speakers lined up and their presentation. So we are likely to go forward. But certainly, would want to, hear from the committee if we think that is something that just will not work. I don't hear anything from the committee.
I want to do it.
Me too.
Yeah, let's keep moving
forward.
Let's move forward.
Let's move forward. Okay.
I think dramatic.
That'll be good.
I agree.
Again, we hopefully will get to see it for a few hours and then come into our meeting and hopefully not be reeling from something going wrong. So.
That's right. That's right.
No kidding.
And Hannah is saying in the chat that there may be maybe a little bit of a scheduling change, but regardless, we'll have a topic that we will all want to. We have, childcare up next. We have childcare. We have higher ed. We have quite a bit to cover. So we will continue to go forward. We look forward to next week's presentation. And unless anyone has any other business, any additional business, you all will get about 13 minutes back in your day. enjoy the last few minutes of the sunshine that's out there in the 40 something weather. And look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Omar.